In a small provincial office somewhere in the Eastern Roman Empire, a clerk you will never know the name of dips his pen and stamps a scroll. On that scroll is the name of a carpenter. The clerk has no idea what he is doing. He thinks he is filling a quota, following an order from a governor, who is following an order from an emperor, who is following the endless hum of imperial bureaucracy. He is actually about to move a pregnant woman and her husband 60 miles down a Roman road into a town too small for its own inn, in the exact week she is due to give birth. Hold that thought. We will come back to that scroll. This is not a story about Rome the villain, standing quietly in the corner of a Bible illustration. This is not a story about Rome the backdrop, painted in gray behind the real action. This is not a story about Rome the accident of history. This is a story about Rome the instrument, the empire that built the roads, wrote the laws, minted the coins, and raised the crosses that shaped almost every major turn in the life of Jesus of Nazareth. You have heard this story before. The manger, the shepherds, the cross. But you have probably never been shown how much of it only happened because of decisions made in the marble halls of Rome, by men who never once thought about a Jewish carpenter's family, and yet somehow built the very stage that family would stand on. Here's what most people miss. Rome did not simply exist alongside the gospel story. Rome shaped its geography, its timeline, its language, and its ending. Start with that scroll. Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, wanted a count of his empire. Every household, every province, registered and taxed. The Greek word for it is apograph, a registration, a number assigned to a person. It sounds bloodless. It was not. Because of that single administrative decision, a carpenter named Joseph and his young pregnant wife Mary had to leave their home in Nazareth and travel to Bethlehem, the town of Joseph's ancestry, to be counted like livestock in a ledger. You can imagine what that journey felt like. Days on a hard road, on foot or on the back of a donkey, in a woman's final weeks of pregnancy, because a man she would never meet, in a city she would never see, wanted a number on a scroll. And when they arrived, there was no room, not out of cruelty, out of sheer bureaucratic chaos, because half the region had been forced onto the same roads at the same time, for the same census. Jesus was born in a place built for animals because Rome needed a head count. But it gets stranger. The town itself, Bethlehem, mattered because centuries earlier, a prophet had said the Messiah would come from there. Rome's tax policy, without meaning to, without knowing to, fulfilled a promise it had never read. Here's the part nobody tells you. The danger did not end with the birth. It escalated. Herod the Great ruled Judea, but he did not rule it as a free king. He ruled it as Rome's man, an Idumean appointed and propped up by the Roman Senate, allowed to keep his throne only as long as he kept Rome happy. Herod built magnificent things. He expanded the temple platform in Jerusalem into one of the largest religious structures in the ancient world. And he governed with the paranoia of a man who knew his crown was borrowed, not earned. So when foreign visitors arrived asking where they might find a newborn king of the Jews, Herod did not hear a fairy tale. He heard a threat to a throne Rome had lent him, and in his fear he gave the order that still turns stomachs 2,000 years later. The massacre of the infant boys of Bethlehem. Mothers in that small town buried children, because a client king, terrified of losing Rome's favor, chose slaughter over risk. You feel the weight of that. A family barely settled after a census-forced journey, now forced to flee again, this time to Egypt. Refugees from a massacre ordered by a puppet of the empire that had already uprooted them once. This is the pattern you're going to see again and again tonight. Rome's systems, meant for order, kept colliding with one family's life at the worst possible moments. Now, step back and look at daily life. Nazareth was not a peaceful village floating outside history. It sat inside a province occupied by foreign soldiers, taxed by foreign officials, and governed under foreign law. The coin in a Nazarene's pocket bore the face of a man in Rome he would never meet. The road outside his door might have been built or rebuilt by Roman engineers, meant to move soldiers and tax revenue, not pilgrims and carpenters, though it moved them too. Jesus grew up under occupation. Every meal, every trade, every conversation in the marketplace happened under the shadow of an empire that considered Judea a small, troublesome province at the edge of its territory. That is the world he was born into. Not a peaceful backdrop, an occupied one. Stay with me, because here is where the pattern becomes undeniable. Every piece of Jesus' early life, his birthplace, his family's danger, his people's daily bread, already carries Rome's fingerprint. And we have not even reached the part where Rome kills him. If a story like this is opening your eyes to how tightly history and scripture are woven together, take a second and subscribe. There is a lot more of this pattern still ahead. Now watch what happens next, because Rome does not stay in the background. It steps directly into Jesus' ministry, and it asks him a question designed to destroy him. Either way, he answers. Religious leaders bring Jesus a Roman coin, a denarius, and ask if it's lawful to pay taxes to Caesar. It is a trap with two jaws. Say yes, and he looks like a collaborator with the occupying empire, betraying his own people. Say no, and he can be reported to Rome as an agitator stirring rebellion against imperial tax law, a capital offense. Jesus asks whose image is stamped on the coin. Caesar's, they answer. And he gives them a line that has echoed through 2,000 years of political and theological argument. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. 6 words that dodge no question and answer a deeper one, that Rome's currency, Rome's image, Rome's claim on the coin in your pocket does not touch the claim God has on your soul. Here's the part nobody tells you. This was not a hypothetical debate for Jesus. Rome's taxation was crushing. Tax collectors, Jewish men working for Rome, were despised precisely because they represented an empire, draining a conquered people to fund the very government occupying them. When Jesus dined with tax collectors, he was dining with the visible edge of Roman power, sitting in the poorest corners of Judean towns. But it gets stranger still, because the collision between Jesus and Rome was about to become fatal. When Jewish leaders decided Jesus had to die, they ran into a wall. Under Roman occupation, the local authorities did not hold the power of execution. It belonged to Rome alone, a legal right called the ius gladi, the right of the sword. That's why, in the account of the trial, the Jewish leaders tell the Roman governor, "It is not lawful for us to put any man to death." Only Rome could kill, and so Jesus was brought before Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect of Judea, not because Jewish law demanded a Roman trial, but because Roman law required one. This single legal fact changed everything about how Jesus died. Under Jewish law, blasphemy was punished by stoning, but Rome did not execute by stoning. Rome executed by crucifixion, a punishment designed by an empire that understood public terror as policy, a slow, humiliating death meant to be seen from the road, a warning to anyone who might challenge Roman order. Jesus did not die the death his own people would have chosen. He died the death Rome had perfected. Pilate, according to the record, found no real charge against him, tried to release him, and still under pressure, handed him over. And then Pilate did something small that carries enormous weight. He ordered a sign nailed above the cross, a titulus, the official Roman placard listing a condemned man's crime, written this time in 3 languages: Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. Hebrew for the language of the people he ruled, Latin, the language of Rome itself, Greek, the common trade language of the entire Eastern Mediterranean. Without meaning to, Pilate had written the first trilingual proclamation of Jesus' identity, nailed above his dying body, readable by nearly everyone in the ancient world who happened to walk by. And there, at the foot of that same cross, stood a Roman centurion, a career soldier of the empire that had just executed an innocent man, watching Jesus die. Something in that death broke through even his hardened certainty, and he said the words that still stop people cold. Truly, this man was the Son of God. Rome's own soldier, standing beside Rome's own instrument of execution, became one of the first witnesses to what that death actually meant. This is not a story about Rome simply crushing Jesus. This is not a story about an empire that got the last word. This is not a story about power silencing truth. This is a story about the very machinery built to erase a man becoming the platform that displayed him to the world. Remember that scroll from the very beginning? The census clerk stamping Joseph's name, moving a family 60 miles down a Roman road? Follow that same imperial machinery forward 1 more generation, and you find a man named Saul of Tarsus, born in a Roman provincial capital, born, like very few in the empire ever were, a Roman citizen by birth. That single legal status, civis Romanus sum, I am a Roman citizen, meant Saul, later called Paul, could not legally be flogged without trial, could not be executed without appeal, and could demand to have his case heard by the emperor himself. Paul used every one of those rights. In Philippi, Roman magistrates who had illegally beaten him were forced to publicly apologize once they learned his citizenship. Later, facing a rigged trial designed to have him killed quietly in Jerusalem, Paul spoke 4 words that legally rerouted his entire future. I appeal to Caesar. Under Roman law, that appeal could not be denied. It sent him, under Roman guard, on Roman ships, along Roman roads, directly toward the capital of the empire that had crucified his Lord. And the roads themselves. By the time of the earliest church, Rome's engineers had built and connected a network of highways stretching an estimated 56,000 miles across the known world, linking cities from Britain to Syria, guarded well enough that a traveler could move with a safety unheard of before Roman rule. Historians call the stability of that era the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It was never built for missionaries. It was built for soldiers, for tax collectors, for the movement of imperial power. But Paul walked those same roads, sailed those same sea lanes out of ports like Caesarea and Puteoli, and carried a message about a crucified Jewish carpenter into the very heart of the empire that killed him. Here is the modern bridge, because this pattern is not just ancient. Think about the last time you sat filling out a form for some faceless government office. A system that does not know your name, does not care about your story, only needs a box checked and a number recorded. That is exactly how Rome felt to Mary and Joseph on that road to Bethlehem. That is exactly how Rome felt to Paul, dragged through provincial courts as a case number in an imperial docket. And yet, that same cold, indifferent machinery became the exact road God used. The census that placed a birth, the citizenship that protected a missionary, the roads that carried a message, the languages on a cross that announced a name. Even the Roman historian Tacitus, writing decades later with open contempt for the movement, confirmed almost in passing that a man called Christ had been executed under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. A hostile Roman source, unintentionally corroborating the very story Rome had tried to end on a hill outside Jerusalem. Rome thought it was building an empire. It was building a delivery system. So here is what to carry with you tonight. First, nearly every major turning point in Jesus' story, his birthplace, his death sentence, the spread of his message across the ancient world, depended on specific Roman systems: a census, a client king, a governor's legal authority, a network of roads, a status of citizenship. Second, and closer to home, God does not wait for friendly, convenient circumstances before he works. He works through empires. He works through bureaucracies. He works through systems that have no idea they are being used for something eternal. If your life right now feels shaped by forces bigger than you, forces that do not know your name any better than a Roman clerk knew Joseph's, you are standing in more familiar territory than you think. And third, the last thing, the one that should sit with you the longest, Rome built the cross to end Jesus. Rome built the roads that carried his name to the ends of the earth. The very empire that thought it silenced him on a Friday afternoon outside Jerusalem became, within a single generation, the highway system that carried his story into Caesar's own household in Rome itself. The empire tried to bury him. Instead, it became his delivery system. Which piece of Rome's fingerprint on Jesus' story surprised you the most? Tell me below. Because 2,000 years later, the empire is gone. The roads are broken stone under modern highways. The coins are museum pieces. And the name on that census scroll is still being read aloud, in every language Pilate never imagined, in places no Roman emperor ever conquered.